So, welcome to this week's episode of Crap No One Tells You. With me today is Tom McKee. He is financial advisor with Edward Jones, but he's not here in the capacity as a financial advisor today, but rather because of his background in the restaurant industry. And today we're going to talk about some of the crap no one tells you about running a restaurant. So, welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, let me just go right into it. What is some of the crap no one tells you about running an actual restaurant?
So one, pretty obvious, not everybody can do it. You hear about people who exit careers in corporations and, open restaurants and they fail disastrously. It makes sense. It's probably one of the most demanding jobs out there, emotionally, physically, mentally as well. And no, if you haven't done it before, you cannot just jump right into it and do it all over again.
Wait a minute. So owning a restaurant or running a restaurant isn't just sitting at the bar, talking to everybody,
Exactly.
hanging out.
And I think that's the draw, right? It's a social environment. People have fun inside of restaurants and they think this would be a great business. So no, the work that goes into it's pretty ridiculous. So
Yeah. Most people don't know this, but I came from a restaurant background. So I'm kind of familiar with the 16, 18-hour shifts, all that stuff. And it all seems fine and dandy on the surface when you're there visiting, but when you actually have to be involved in running it, it's a completely different animal.
yeah, no, absolutely it is.
So I was talking to someone that ran a restaurant previously, and he said probably 90% of his job that he didn't expect was HR, human resources, that dealing with people was
Yeah.
pretty much all he said his restaurant business was. He's like, it's 10% food, 90% dealing with people.
Yeah. Well, and that's clients and your staff as well, right? Um, yeah. And in today's age, it's funny because I was in restaurants a while ago and the transition from manage everybody the same way to the old school mentality
Hmm.
to the new school. You are managing everybody as an individual. So now one management style doesn't work for the broad category. It is individual management styles for every person. If you have somebody that gets upset easily, you're going in there with kid gloves. If you have somebody that needs tough love, you need to give them tough love. It was interesting. One of the companies that I worked for sent us away for this, um, uh, not a retreat, but almost a retreat. It was kind of like let's talk about people's feelings and things like that. And you could see the old school restaurant managers and their heads like almost exploding that they were going to have to manage different people based on their personalities, not their broadcast style. Luckily I was pretty young in my career when I figured that out. Or when I went to this thing, but, yeah, it was wild. And just to see the transition from the old school kind of to the new school was wild in itself.
I'm just laughing because I remember my very first head chef that I used to work under. And people go, well, people like Gordon Ramsay don't exist in the world. And I'm like, you should have seen my first head chef that actually poured. I was supposed to be making some kind of dessert, and I think it was forget what it was, but anyway, the batter that I had that I was working with was way too thin. And the guy literally comes over and goes, "What crap is this?" And he pours it all over my workstation. And for the next hour, I cleaned it up and had to redo it. And I'm like, I'm trying to imagine that management style functioning today.
I will say the kitchens, yeah, functioning today, rough in itself, but, the kitchens are a little bit of a different animal. I think, as a chef, as a sous chef, as a line cook in general, you develop a little bit tougher of a skin. But nonetheless, same piece. You still are managing individuals to their, their personality. So no, that likely wouldn't fly anymore.
So, let's talk a little bit about the actual management of the restaurant. I mean, there are so many things that go into it between being aware of your margins, bringing in produce, wastefulness. Like these are all things like I always tell people I learned more about running a business and marketing working in a restaurant than any schooling I've ever had.
Yeah.
What you went to college for?
Hotel, restaurant, institutional management.
So let me ask the obvious question here. Out of everything you learned in school, how much, first of all, how much of it was actually useful information, and what were the things that were the most useful when you then started running the restaurant?
So I would say all the behind the scenes stuff from college was absolutely useful. Learning P&Ls, food costs, maintenance of equipment, right? Like the textbook stuff that I got was good. It gave me a good base. What it didn't teach me, luckily, we needed to have 10,000 hours worked in a restaurant or some sort of kitchen or hotel, whatever it was, prior to graduation. Does that make sense?
10,000 hours. That's a lot of hours.
It might be 1,000 then. It was
Okay.
1,000.
I was going to say 10,000 hours. That's like a full 4-year internship.
You have to be a, what is that? That's to be considered a professional or a master in your industry. So rewind that. It was 1,000 hours. That is where I learned the majority of what I needed to know, right? Because it is number one, the hard work ethic that you need inside of the business. It is the not ever 8-hour day. That's like a half a day, right? That's a half day. An 8 hour is a half day that you need to work inside of the business. It's the developing of personal relationships as well. But there's something to be said about the industry in general. And I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, listen, I was like, restaurants are a great place to work. You can make a lot of money very quickly. I said, but the one thing is you cannot get sucked in.
Right.
What do you mean can't get sucked in? Well, you now have a community that you are friends with, that you hang out with, that you have a great time with, that care about you, that if you leave the restaurants, you don't have that anymore, right? You are thinking on your feet at all times, making quick decisions. That is attractive. When you have a busy shift and you have that adrenaline rush that's coming from working that busy shift, it's another thing that draws you in. You can make good money at a young age very quickly. And now all of a sudden you have this career ahead of you. The crap they don't tell you about that is, it sucks you in at first. And now you have gone along this path, but then you have a family and you have kids and, but that's my reason for leaving the industry. I was missing my children growing up because I was working nights and weekends and my weeks would start at like 55 hours. If I was working 55 hours a week, that was a good week.
Yeah, that was a short
week, right?
Right.
So I think that's one of the biggest pieces is that's one of the things that people don't know. The restaurant industry has the ability to suck you in because you have the camaraderie. You get guests and fellow workers that become best friends and almost like family.
I learned, fortunately, early on before I got totally sucked in, it is one of the few industries I've worked in, and I worked in a few, where it is almost a lifestyle business.
Definitely.
Right? Like you have to, still remember I had done 23 days straight. Anybody that's been in the industry, I was working, kitchen 23 days straight. Well, our shift, we had to be there. Our restaurant didn't even open till noon, but we had to be there by 8:30 or 9 to start prepping. And I was last man out, right? So I had to wait for the last table to leave in case they wanted dessert. So for 23 days straight, I was leaving at like midnight, 1 a.m. and I was back in by 9 o'clock at the latest. And I still remember I sat down with the owner of the restaurant and my head chef, both of which I'd gotten to know really well working there for that time. And I just looked at them and I said, I don't want your lives.
Yeah.
Like I respect you. I admire you. I have learned a tremendous amount from you, but the lifestyle you lead is not the lifestyle I want.
Yeah.
And I mean, my head chef was there probably more than I was. And the owner was there more than the head chef. And I'm like, do you guys ever see the inside of your house?
Or your family?
Right.
If you have one.
If you have one.
If they haven't left by now?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So it's one of those fascinating things that I think in general about the restaurant industry is like if there was an industry there that was a cult, I would say working in a kitchen more so than just the restaurant, but I would say like the kitchen world being the culinary end of it is probably as close to it as you can get.
Yeah. Well, because there is definitely something to be said for it. There is a love that is developed for it.
There's a passion, not just love.
Yeah.
Like
No.
there is a passion for it,
Yeah.
right?
No, without a doubt. I think one of the other things, the crap they don't tell you, there is some hazing that goes on inside of the restaurant industry.
Yep.
Everywhere you look.
Yep.
In my time, I opened a significant amount of restaurants. One of the companies I was with, I came on board at 15, and they sold at like 120 something. And that was all opened within 5-year time frame. So all the different openings that I would be doing, we would tell people that they needed to go get the rice peeler. When they would say, what is that?
There's always one.
It looks like a potato peeler, just really, really tiny. We would have them empty the hot water out of the coffee machine, or not the hot water, just empty the water out of the coffee machine. It's tied to a line, so you could literally sit there forever doing it. The best was, the host station is normally like an entry point to restaurants, right? So a lot of younger people, and we would be on a wait, and we would be crazy busy. The lobby would be full, and we would tell the host, we need to go get the wall mover. We need to make the restaurant bigger so we can seat more guests. Go get the wall mover out of the back. So just like, and that's light stuff.
Yes,
right?
it is. I'm just thinking some of the stuff we went through and some of the stuff we did to others.
Kitchens are
like,
a lot worse.
I still remember when I interned for my culinary, my very first day, I walk in all excited.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah, right? I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. My uncle had just given me my first knife set. I had it in a bag. I had my uniform all ironed, like all out. Like this restaurant used to be like a Michelin star. They had a Michelin star for a while, right? So that's the level restaurant I was in. So I'm super excited. I go in there and I introduce myself and talk to everyone, and I can see everybody's kind of looking at me, and I'm like, this is not going to be good. Whatever it is, it's not going to be. They're looking at me like this for a reason.
Yeah.
So the head chef comes in like 5 minutes after I did. And he goes, listen, we really want you to learn how to do a specific task today. So this is the only thing you'll be doing. I'm like, okay, I guess that's good. And he takes me to like a back room that was all dark and dingy. And there were probably 200 pounds of potatoes. And he's like, I need you to cut all of these into uniform size. And that was literally what I did my entire first day at that restaurant as an intern, was cut potatoes into a uniform size. And it had to have 8 edges on it and all be within. When I went home that night, it made me question my existence. Like when you see the movies where they're like peeling potatoes in the military, and I'm like, been there, done that. Never want to do that again.
Yours is even worse.
But yeah, that was found out later that they never needed all those potatoes. Like that was just their way of saying welcome, and this is what you're in for.
Right. See if you could handle it.
Right. It was a test, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if that still happens today. I mean, this is going back quite a few years, but I know there's still stuff I still know people in the culinary world. And yes, if they have tests to haze you, and they're just trying to see if you're going to fit it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's such a lifestyle culture. We can't say cult, but I'm going to call it a cult anyway. But you have to have that mentality, I think, if you're going to survive.
Yeah.
So, everybody that starts a restaurant gets rich, right?
Yeah.
That's the myth, right? Like open a restaurant, there's lots of money to be made. The margins are fantastic. Everybody's happy.
Nope. Margins are horrible. Literally a lot of them, penny businesses. And that is, that's even on a corporate scale. So your big companies that do it are on a rinse and repeat level. If you're doing well, you're talking 15 cents on the dollar, maybe But at the same time, then you take that to a corporate level and you pay everybody and all the needs from corporate. And now you're down to, if you're lucky, 3, 4%. So think about how much you need to do on a weekly basis in sales just to get to that piece where you might be making some money. Um, the other side of it, and I was just having a conversation the other day. I think it was 40% of new businesses fail within the first year.
Right.
My number was double that because I was thinking restaurants.
Oh yeah.
I think it's like 75 to 80% of new restaurants fail within the first 2 years. And if you push out 5,
It's like
those
nine-
left.
it's like 90.
Right. Oh, so the original, right?
Yes.
It gets even worse.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Because people realize it's not a sustainable business to be in if you have not come from it in the past. But at the same time, I mean, you're talking food cost from huge corporations that write contracts nationally
Mhm.
to now you are an individual restaurant and you need to try to negotiate contracts. You're not getting close to the numbers that they're getting. So that's another big piece, right? Is the inability. Well, and now all of a sudden where you have a, 25-ish, depending, liquor cost. Well, all of a sudden that free drink that you just gave away, now that bottle costs you money.
Right.
So the little things along those lines, it's just, it literally breaks down to being a penny business, penny on the dollar.
So, one of my buddies that's a restaurant owner, he actually brought up a point a while ago, and I had never thought about it until he said it. And one of the things that does get skewed in that failure number is that the vast majority of businesses that fail, restaurants that fail, are in a metropolitan area because of the sheer competition. Like your competitor is literally next door,
Yeah.
right? While when you go out to the suburbs, next door could be a mile drive or 2 mile drive. So you have I think he used the word, I have a more dedicated customer base than what you would find in some metropolitan areas because there are so many choices there,
Right.
right? Like within walking distance, you could have 20 restaurants if you're in New York City or Philadelphia,
For sure.
right? Out in the suburbs, that's a 10-minute drive in each direction to get the same selection.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, look at rental costs as well, right? I mean, you're going to have a significantly higher cost of rent if you are in a metropolitan area compared to being out in the suburbs somewhere.
Yeah.
Another big piece there for sure.
So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they don't tell you about the restaurant industry. And not that I'm trying to talk anybody out of starting a restaurant or getting into it. I think everybody at some point in their life should take a year and work in the restaurant industry because I can't name anything else that I worked in. And I've been in a ton of stuff when I was younger. I can't think of anything that taught me more about running a business than being involved in a restaurant. Like,
I completely agree. Everybody should work in a restaurant. One, I think one of the biggest pieces is it'll teach you humility when your meal or your occasion isn't going all that great. You're not the only one in the restaurant. They're dealing with a whole lot of things. One person calls off and it's a ripple effect. That in itself is why, in my opinion, it should teach you how to tip as well, right? But it definitely teaches you about how hard people work inside of restaurants. But nonetheless, one, absolutely taught me how to teach to manage people.
Mhm.
Two, absolutely taught me a ridiculously strong work ethic, which I'm doing my best to impart to my children. My son's there. We're working on my daughter's stuff. And then I think the other piece is it really teaches you how to interact with people in general, because you have regulars that are coming in that become friends. You have staff that you're working with and or managing that becomes almost like a family.
Mhm.
You are seeing real life on an every single day basis. And it just teaches you how to deal with it, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting because one of the restaurants I worked at, I had to do a week as a server. Being in the kitchen, they still forced me to do a week as a server. And they're like, we don't expect you to be perfect, but you need to know when the server comes back to you and is upset, we need you to understand what he's feeling.
Yeah.
And that week of serving front of house absolutely changed my perspective on a lot of things. And that's when I learned that a lot of times, like literally the house is on fire but you as a guest would never know it.
Yep.
Right? Like,
That's the adrenaline.
right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean,
That's the quick thinking on your feet. Right?
yes.
That's all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that all of that stuff, working both front and back of house in a restaurant, absolutely teaches you so many life skills.
Definitely.
Not just for being in business, but I think for life in general.
Yeah.
Like, it just, you learn how to respond differently to different things. Like, no pun intended, but if you're in a kitchen, you sometimes literally have to react to things being on fire, like literally on fire, right?
Actual fire.
Yes. So
While still getting food out, dealing with other special requests, whatever it is.
yes,
Oh yeah.
it's a very fascinating industry, to say the least.
Yeah. I think one thing is it teaches you how to always be calm and cool, regardless of the situation that's going on. I remember we were opening up a restaurant, and we barely have staff at this point. It's all managers, and we just got the letter of being able to open from the Department of Health. So this new kitchen manager is so excited because he's going to cook food for everybody. He's going to cook lunch for everybody. Well, he turns so we had shortening was our fryer oil.
Mhm.
So it came in big blocks. And so he throws shortening onto a fryer and turns the heat on, thinking that it's going to just melt and it'll be fine. Yeah, no, we had a straight oil fire. So these beautiful,
Man,
these absolutely gorgeous, brand new stainless steel fryers that we had like literally just unpacked the week before, now are black everywhere. But he was dancing. It was hilarious. He's like dancing back and forth because he has no idea what to do.
pour water on it.
Exactly. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching him for a second, and I'm like, man, the Ansel system's going to go off. We're going to have powder everywhere in a second. So I'm literally like walking a new hire, like through the restaurant, giving him a tour. I'm just like, hold on one second, go back, grab 2 sheet trays, put 2 sheet trays on top, turn the power off, walk back out, grab my new hire, and just kind of continue with like nothing had ever happened. Like, it was just like, the guy's looking at me like, the new hire's like, the place is about to burn down. The kitchen manager's looking at me like, what did you, fire's out. I'm like, all right, come on, I'm going to show you the storage area, right? So it teaches you how to act in crazy situations, like just calm and cool the whole way through. So that's another good one.
Yeah, and that's funny because like I've had people comment to me like, how the house is burning and you're still calm, and I'm like, yeah, because if I'm not, literally the house will burn down,
Right.
right? Like, and it's not by choice. It's just working in that environment. That's just part of life.
Part of life.
But yeah, it's sorry, I'm like having
well,
flashbacks, like all the stuff we had to deal with in the past.
Well, the funny thing is the guy, the newer kitchen manager, was a big dude. He was like 6'4", 260. So he's a big guy,
Mhm.
and just watching him like literally dance back and forth, having no idea what to do while the fryer is on fire. Just rethinking that. It's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
So, but yeah, as our listeners can tell, we're definitely reminiscing in our own memories of stuff we've had to deal with in the industry. So if you had to recommend, let me rephrase that. Having taken the path you did, doing your schooling, would you recommend, if someone is interested in getting into the restaurant industry, that they look at that as a possibility if they're more interested in the management of it than necessarily the culinary or the front of house? But
Yeah, absolutely. I was a GM by the time I was 23 years old for a national restaurant company with a smaller brand that they were building. That was the 15 to 120 in 5 years. But absolutely, I would say going and getting a degree somewhere inside of it is the right move. You can absolutely work your way through and work your way up inside of restaurants. Again, that's the allure, right? I'm a cook, I'm a server, I'm a something, and they're offering me a management position. Yeah, that's because they're sucking you in. And don't get me wrong, it's an absolutely viable career that will put food on your table. Unfortunately, I had to do a lot of pivoting in the pandemic, but all in all, it is a good industry. It is a lot of fun. I am happy I'm no longer in it. But there are people that absolutely make careers out of managing restaurants and working in restaurants,
Right.
without a doubt.
Yeah. Not to mention the owners of restaurants as well. That
100%. Absolutely. And
there's owners that can do really well. You
absolutely.
just have to know what the hell you're doing.
You have to know
right?
what the hell you're doing. Absolutely. And that's another big piece, right? I mean, some of the favorite restaurants that we eat at, they're not chains. They are individual, privately owned restaurants, and they do an amazing job, and they're around. So they're making money, but they're not making as much as you think.
So, well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I'm sure I'll bring you
Fun
back to.
reminiscing.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure I'll bring you back to talk about some other stuff too. But we will be back next week with another episode.
Awesome. Appreciate it.